Hi, everybody. Great to be here with you. Yay. Hi. Maybe we'll start with the slides. So as Julie said, today we're exploring the blessing known as Asher Yatzar, which means like the one who formed. And this prayer, as Julie said, is colloquially known as the bathroom blessing, and we're going to explore why. And just to say, our session today will touch on the practicalities associated with this blessing, as well as just the nature of the body, the connection between body and soul, wonder and radical amazement, finding holiness in the mundane, disability justice, and accepting ourselves as we are. So that's a little bit of where I think we'll go today. And I would love to, we did this with the Shema session. It was so amazing to see people's associations with the prayer we were studying. So if you have any associations with Asher Yatzar, with this blessing, put them into chat so we can just see different people's relationship. And it might be you've never heard of this blessing before, or you say it every time after you go to the bathroom, or after a particular health issue, you've said it. So just put into chat if you have any associations or personal relationship with this blessing. So as we do that, I'd like to just begin with the body itself. So take a few moments as we get started just to ground yourself in your body. That might mean like taking a breath or relaxing your shoulders or stretching out your arms. Just over the next few moments, notice your breath, your body, any sensations that are arising, and just where you feel ease, maybe comfort, maybe some places of tightness. And just invite you, as it feels comfortable, send your breath to any places that feel tight or restricted, and see what might be able to soften just a little bit. And grant yourself permission to be here in this body, in whatever state it might be in today. And then just a breath of gratitude to your body for the incredible inner workings, for all of the many complex functions that it does that allow you to be here in this present moment. So as we begin, just thank you to the body. Okay, Julie, next slide. Awesome. So blessings in Judaism serve many functions. The most basic and important of which I think is to turn our attention to the everyday miracles of life. So we have blessings for seeing a rainbow, we have blessings for eating a bite of food, we have blessings that maybe are very relevant these days for seeing a friend after a long time away, blessings for setting out on a trip. And blessings help us mark an occasion to pause and to step back and to appreciate and to give thanks. So they're a way to acknowledge the holiness in the everyday and are a tiny portal that we can open to the divine at any time. And as I said when we did the Shema for whoever was there, like I'm sharing my theology and my beliefs on the divine and God here, and you are welcome here with whatever beliefs you hold. So take what I'm saying, switch it to make it make sense for you, take what's meaningful and leave the rest. But just thinking about this radical amazement, as Abraham Joshua Heschel famously wrote, the surest way to suppress our ability to understand the meaning of God and the importance of worship is to take things for granted. He writes, indifference to the sublime wonder of living is the root of sin. Wonder or radical amazement is the chief characteristic of the religious person's attitude toward history and to nature. So Asher Yatzar is a blessing of gratitude for the body. It's a reminder to regard the workings of our body as an incredible gift and to not take for granted the grandeur and the gorgeousness of who each of us are. So let's move into the words of this blessing itself. Julie, on the next slide. Thank you. So here are the words in Hebrew and in English, and I think, if you Google and look up this prayer, you can see many different sort of translations. Some have euphemisms for some of the words, some are kind of more specific. But here are the words. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has formed the human being in wisdom, who has created within them numerous orifices and cavities. It's revealed and known before the throne of your glory that if but one of them were to be blocked, or one of them were to be opened, it would be impossible to exist even for a short while. Blessed are you, God, who heals all flesh and performs wonders. So I want to take the first part of this just to go into some of these words that I think hyperlink to other parts of tradition and to scripture and sort of see where they take us. So the first word I want to go into is Yatzar, right? Asher Yatzar is the name of this blessing. That's like kind of the first key word of it. So next slide, Julie. Thank you so much. So the word Yatzar is one of a number of words in the Hebrew language that means to create. Yatzar is a word that refers both to divine creativity as well as to human creativity. This is a word I think a lot about in my work. You can see uses in Jeremiah and Isaiah and other places where it refers to both to the human as like the potter, and also uses the metaphor of God as the potter, and human beings as the clay that God shapes. And fittingly, Yatzar is the verb used in the second creation story in Genesis 2:7, when God forms Adam, the human being, from the Adamah, from the earth. Vayitzer Hashem Elohim et ha'adam afar min ha'adamah. Vayitzer, so it's connected to this same word as this Yatzar. God formed the human being. From the dust of the earth, God blew into Adam's nostrils the breath of life, and the human became a living being. So this word Yatzar takes us back to the very start of creation, to our formation from the soil. So I like to think of this as Yatzar then as a word that like brings us down to earth, literally, into the holy mess, into the mundanity of what it means to be a human being, shaped not only of starlight and shimmer and soul, but also of soil and earth and clay and rock and dust. So Asher Yatzar too, beginning with the same word, serves as the blessing that brings us back down to earth. We might think of it that way, to the holy mundane miracle of our bodily functions, and reconnects us to that first moment of being shaped, of being formed, being created by the divine. So Yatzar, as I mentioned, also speaks to human creativity, whereas the word bara, the second word in the Torah, Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning God created, so that's another created word, bara. This is reserved only for divine creating. Yatzar is also about human creativity. So one resonance this also has for me for this blessing is that all of our creativity comes from being embodied. It comes from being in the fullness of who we are, and from sensing through all the ways that we're able to sense, to intuit, and to know that go beyond just the rational mind. So just the deep knowing of the body. And that leads us to the next word I want to explore. So Julie, next slide. Thank you so much. Chochmah, bechochmah. So the blessing goes on, Asher Yatzar et ha'adam bechochmah, God who made the human being with wisdom. So I think it can be confusing, exactly what is meant here. It could be read as God who made the human being to have wisdom. It could be read as God who with wisdom created the human being, and perhaps both are meant. And another layer that we might hear in this phrase with the word chokhmah in particular takes us back again, I think, to the creation story. You can follow me on this little tangent of a midrash, of a rabbinic story, but the Torah opens Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning God created. This is usually how those three words are translated. But midrash, rabbinic literature, likes to spin morals and stories and teachings from small turns of phrase or linguistic elements of verses and offers another read on this. So be, the bet, that first letter in Hebrew, can mean in, like in the beginning, but it can also mean with or by means of. So Midrash reads this as with be reshit, with reshit, God created the world. And to help explain what reshit could mean here, Midrash brings in another verse, a verse from Psalms that says reshit chokhmah, in the beginning, wisdom. So in its context, the verse in Psalms is talking about the beginning of wisdom is fear of God, but Midrash takes this out of context, as it loves to do, and it says reshit equals chokhmah, reshit chokhmah, because those two words are next to each other. So plugging this back into our verse from Genesis, we could say with chokhmah, God created the world. And chokhmah in Midrash is imagined as God's chevruta, or God's like learning or creative partner in shaping the world. And in his article, Chokhmah, the Blueprint of Creation, Rabbi Rami Shapiro begins a poem that he writes, speaking in the voice of Chokhmah, where he writes, I am the deep grain of creation, the subtle current of life, God fashioned me before all things. I am the blueprint of creation. I was there from the beginning, from before there was a beginning. So Chokhmah is that which pervades and penetrates all things. We find this in the wisdom of Solomon. So back to our blessing, Asher Yatzar. Asher Yatzar et ha'adam bechokhmah. Just as the universe is formed through a partnership with God and Chokhmah, wisdom, we might read this line as we too are shaped through this divine creative partnership with Chokhmah. The deep wisdom of the universe that existed before any of us arrived and will exist long after we are gone. So our bodies, we might imagine then, are the beautiful work of this co-creative partnership. Okay, that's Chokhmah, and I love this image. Okay, next slide, Julie. And I'll say, just to pause for a second, I really appreciate, I can't tend to all the chat right now, but that everyone's putting in their associations with this blessing, and I want to get to those as we move further on and into the talk. So thank you, continue to put those there. Okay, so the next set of words, Nikavim, Nikavim. So Asher Yatzar goes on to name what is so incredible about the human body, that we are made with Nikavim, Nikavim. And Carrie Olitsky in Jewish Paths Towards Healing and Wholeness writes, most prayer books attempt to translate the core elements of this prayer rather creatively as the intricate network of finely tuned organs and orifices. And then says, for Nikavim, Nikavim, Chalulim, Chalulim, which we'll look at in a second, I prefer to let the Hebrew speak for itself. Holes, holes, tubes, tubes. So kind of getting right down to the core of it. So Nikavim are the holes or the openings in our body. There are the holes that are always open, so nose or mouth, and the holes, well, I guess mouth opens and closes too. And then the other holes that open and close, like urethra and the rectum. So, and I just love that we have a prayer that actually like thinks about these parts of the body and talks about them. On a practical level, our sages taught that we're created with wisdom, so coming off of what we were talking about before, because despite having holes and openings, somehow we are still whole. The great medieval commentator Rashi writes that these words refer to the ability to keep what's outside out and what's inside in, all while allowing for interaction between outside and inside. So this incredible, if we think about it, ability of an organism to keep the outside out and inside in while it's still interacting with its surrounding environment is, in biology or scientific terms, what's called homeostasis. Rashi writes, a body is similar to a flask filled with air, and hence naturally the air should leave, even if a small hole is punctured. The wonder of the body is that despite it being full of holes, its spirit is still guarded within it. So here we touch on the interaction between what is seen as body and what is seen as soul. And we can continue to return to that of like, what is the separation or difference between body or soul, or how do we see those things as one or as separate, and how do they interact? And I think with the word choice of Nikavim, we can't help but hearing resonance again back to the creation story. Nikeva, as in Zachar u Nikeva bara otam, male and female. Nikeva, God created them, the human being. Okay, so we have Nikavim, Nikavim, and we have Chalulim, Chalulim. So it's sort of this like, I don't know, this cadence or poeticness. Julie, the next slide, please, when you have a chance. Thank you so much. So in parallel construction to the Nikavim, Nikavim are the Chalulim, Chalulim, the tubes, the arteries, the veins that run through the body, or like the hollow limbs like stomach or heart or intestines. These are the parts of us that take in and excrete out, that allow for movement between the many parts of who we are, right? Like the blood circulating from head to toe through the cardiovascular system, the oxygen pumping and bringing fresh life to our organs and bloodstream, our organs doing the incredible work of filtering, digesting, expelling, assimilating, and sending signals all throughout our system. And for those of you that have, are doctors or medical professionals or nurses or know more about the body, like add into chat and put in like the other amazing things you're thinking of that the body does. The Velveteen Rabbi, Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt, writes of this phrase, chalulim, chalulim, in a really poetic way, touching again on the nature between, the relationship between body and spirit, and playing off the Hebrew, she writes, a halal is a flute. So this blessing evokes for her the ways in which our bodies, she writes, are like flutes through which the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, flows. I love that. And Midrash Tanchuma, another rabbinic work, writes that the numerical value of the Hebrew words chalulim, chalulim, cavities, cavities, is 248, which is also the number of organs in the body. And I don't know, I was reading differing accounts online of how many organs are actually in the body, and I feel like they've found more recently, so I don't know if that's still true, but it's poetic. And these organs, like we said, do incredible work every single moment, right? Our heart pumps approximately 2,000 gallons of blood through its chambers every single day, beats more than 100,000 times to do so. We take around 17,000 breaths on average, an estimated 50 to 60,000 thoughts pass through our brain each day. The cells in our stomach lining produce an alkaline substance every few milliseconds to neutralize stomach acid. We shed more than 1 million skin cells every day that are replenished automatically, right? Kidneys, if they're working, contain 1 million tiny filters that work together to filter an average of 2.2 pints of blood every minute. And maybe most amazing of all, our body cells are regenerating themselves every single day without any prompting. So this means we might have an entirely new set of taste buds every 10 days, new nails every 6 to 10 days, new bones, a new heart. So we actually are constantly, our bodies are constantly, though they seem sort of maybe static, are constantly in the process of being recreated, of being created anew. In his article, The Blessing of Asher Yatzar and the Miracle of the Human Kidney in Ideals, Dr. Evan Fisher writes from his perspective as a nephrologist, bringing us back to this awe and wonder that we started with Heschel. He writes, the entirety of the human body is nothing short of astounding. Looking at every individual organ system shows an unbelievable functional design down to the smallest and most intricate details. So in this vein, I wanted to offer a poem by the South African spoken word poet Thuli Zuma called 90 Trillion, and I'll just give an excerpt of it, some of the beginning and then some of the end. Even on your worst days, when there is nothing fair about enough, and you feel you do not come close to it anywhere, when you cannot bring yourself to say the words you mean, let alone mean the words you say, skipping ahead, you are still 90 trillion cells holding together, building up life, willing you be. You are harmony, a celestial symphony. This is not a metaphor. It is a statement of fact. And then skipping ahead. You are miracle, a quilt of dreams stitched together with blood, bone, and limb. And even on those dark days, though the voices in your head will not agree, you are not defect, you are not damaged, you are not default, you are not sorry, and you should not be. You are a miracle, you are harmony, you are 90 trillion cells weaving new tapestry. Each one testifies to the mystery that even on the worst day, even at your worst, you are still your be, you are miracle, you are miracle. Why is it you insist on walking through this life as though you are any less? So let's take that in, and there's a really powerful video of her reciting that poem herself, that spoken word piece, so you can find that on YouTube. Julie, the next slide. Thank you for everyone. I'm just checking in, adding in the numbers and the organs. So then we have this v'la'amod lefanecha. So after acknowledging the incredible intricacies and workings of our body, Asher Yatzar goes on to say, if one of these openings were to be blocked or opened at the wrong time, we wouldn't be able to stand before your throne of glory. And yet we know that oftentimes our bodies don't work the way we might have been told that they should work, or don't work in the same way that other people's bodies work. We have kidney failure and breathing difficulty and disabilities of all kinds, visible and invisible. So our relationship to the body, just to acknowledge, is of course not always one of awe and appreciation. It can be hard, it can be complicated, and this can be compounded by living in an ableist society. So, and we also know that our relationship to our body can and will change throughout our lifetime. And I wanted to bring in two pieces on this, one from the Velveteen Rabbi, again, Rachel Barenblatt, who reflects on how her relationship to this prayer has changed throughout her life and her health challenges. She writes, after I had my strokes, I developed a new relationship with the idea that if one of the body's many openings should be accidentally closed, it's no longer possible to stand before God and offer praise. My relationship to the body, my relationship with the blessing changed again when I became pregnant and started giving myself daily injections of blood thinner. I recited the blessing every morning as the needle's plunger found its way home. And then I treated my expanding belly to some lotion, both to soothe the sting of the injection and because I couldn't help marveling as my physical form started to shift and change. Today, the blessing has become mundane again. I'm no longer worried about blood clots sneaking their way into my brain. I take my handful of pills every morning and I trust that they're all doing their job and that my blood will continue to flow freely where it ought to be flowing. And I no longer have to steel myself to pinch a generous fold of flesh and guide a needle home. But the habit of reciting the blessing remains, a reminder that my body is a miracle, that everybody is a miracle always. And so I think we also must inquire into this phrase, to stand before your throne of glory. So what does this mean for those who cannot stand? Perhaps it's meant as a metaphor, saying we would not be able to live. But to bless the body using a phrase that rings hollow to those unable to stand, I think makes us ask larger questions about what does it mean to make this blessing if and when our body doesn't function in the way we might want? And Emily Aviva Kapoor-Mader, who identifies as a radical trans-feminist rabbi and activist, and as autistic and transgender, writes of her relationship to this blessing in a beautiful piece on Open Siddur, called Asher Yatzar, Prayer for Recognizing the Divine Image in All Our Bodies, and writes that this bathroom blessing has always rung hollow to me, at best, and at worst, it's been a prayer not celebrating beauty, but highlighting pain. She writes, the original version, translated in this way, praises bodies whose nekavim, chalulim, chalulim, all manner of ducts and tubes are properly opened and closed. Yes, in a digestive, excretory sense, she writes, but it is quite easy to read a reproductive sense into it as well. What do you do if the ducts and tubes in your body are not properly open and closed? What if one is open that should be closed, or vice versa? She says, the prayer goes on to say that if one of the ducts and tubes should be open that was closed, or vice versa, it would be impossible to stand and become established in God's presence. The ableist implications of this have always rung hollow. Many people cannot stand. Many people can stand, and it is not impossible for them to be established in the divine presence, despite the imperfections of their bodies. There's a whole range of experiences here. She writes, how can we affirm these experiences rather than continue to celebrate the normativity thrust upon us by a normative society? That's something I struggle with every day. And then just one final piece that she writes that touches back on what we were looking at the beginning with chokhmah, with this wisdom. The Hebrew word bechokhmah means with wisdom, and it has the same syntactic ambiguity as in English, as we talked about. Did God create by utilizing God's own wisdom in our creation, or did God create humanity to embody wisdom as part of our deepest strata of being? She writes, I think it can be both, but it can be often difficult for us, disabled people, transgender people, all sorts of people with non-normative bodies, who often feel disconnected and pained about our bodies, to have to hear repeatedly that God made us with wisdom for a reason. I think you can read it as the latter. We have been given wisdom, the wisdom to recognize the divinity within each of us, the sacredness of our essence, the power and potential for continuous creation and recreation. That's what it means to be created in God's image. God may be a creator, but so are we. We are creators, and that is a sacred and beautiful task. So I want to move to the final sort of words of this blessing and then get into a little bit of the practicalities of saying it. Thank you, Julie. So we end this blessing by referring to God as the one who heals all flesh. There's so many names we have for God, right? God is our rock and our redeemer, our creator of heaven and earth, shield of Abraham, king of kings, maker of peace. The list goes on. And here in this prayer, we call on God's power as a healer of the body. And for me, I can't help but recall Moses and Miriam as we say these words, healer of flesh, rafeh basar. For it's when Miriam was stricken with a disease that Moses prays for her healing, Ana elna refa nala. So that same word, refa, rofeh. God, please heal her. And Rabbi Shefa Gold, who has taught some of these other sessions in this series, hears these words in this way. She writes, it's the divine spark within me that gives my body the intelligence to heal itself. That amazing intelligence is at work at this very moment. With this practice, I recognize my body's capacity for self-healing, and I activate that divine healing power that is latent within each and every cell. And then finally, Julie, next slide, we end this blessing with the phrase, God who acts wondrously. This phrase, umafli la'asot, actually comes from Judges 13:19, when a person named Manoach and his wife are making an offering to God, and then a wondrous thing happens. Flames leap out from the altar and an angel of God appears. This phrase is found there. This is a characteristic of many blessings, right? In which phrases are taken from places in Torah and then woven together with other words to create a blessing. So it's kind of like a collage exercise. And this allows us to read deeper and deeper resonance into these words as they start to hyperlink to other associations that we have with them. So as we get into some of the practicalities and practices of saying this blessing, I think this is just particularly amazing that Asher Yatzar is a blessing we say after going to the bathroom. We say it after washing and drying our hands as soon as we leave the bathroom. I think it could also be a prayer, as some of you have written, right? For surgery, for recovering from an illness, these like sort of bigger and more notable things. But it is also a daily prayer for just going to the bathroom. So just first of all, how amazing to have a tradition that is so grounded in just like the reality of what it means to be alive, that it acknowledges and sanctifies this everyday action, and how incredible to lift up this action to the level of fele, of like wonder or marvel. Okay, just a few more slides. Next one is about practicalities and practices. So the origin of this blessing is in the Talmud, in Brachot 60b, where a person named Abaye says, when one comes out of the bathroom, one should say, and then gives over the words that exactly the words that we have for the blessing that we looked at the beginning, the blessing that we know today as Asher Yatzar. And that the practices are, as I said, we're invited, or Jewish law asks us to recite it every time we go to the bathroom. Immediately, Mishnah Berurah says, say it immediately upon exiting the bathroom after washing your hands. So that we're not meant to say it in the bathroom. And Jewish tradition even has guidelines and practices around going to the bathroom. A book called the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch has a bunch of guidance for us. Like, I just think it's important to bring this, that like these rabbis were talking so kind of down to earth. One must relieve oneself as soon as one feels the need without delay. One must be modest in the toilet. Don't relieve yourself in front of other people unless there is a partition. One must be careful not to overly strain, for it could create problems in the colon. Like this is like the level of what is being talked about. And because Asher Yatzar is recited in the morning after relieving ourselves, it's part of the beautiful collection of morning blessings that can be seen as and it can be seen, I think, this blessing, Asher Yatzar, as a companion blessing to Elohai Neshama. Asher Yatzar is blessing the workings of the body, and Elohai Neshama starts, God, the soul you have placed within me is pure. And one of my great teachers, Rabbi Eben Lieder, shared with me that when he recites these two blessings, he recites them imagining like the soul speaking to the miracle of the body, and the body speaking then in Asher Yatzar, and then the body speaking of the miracle of the soul with Elohai Neshama. So I love that idea of like soul and body speaking to one another. And then last slide, thank you. I wanted to end with the thought that by connecting us deeply to our body, Asher Yatzar also takes us beyond our body. That this is a blessing for all the ways in which we are able to open, I think like literally and metaphorically, and close at the right time. So psychologically, spiritually, for self-protection and for self-growth. It's a blessing that says we, each and every one of us, were created with wisdom and were created wondrously. And it proclaims the possibility of healing, of body, of mind, of spirit, and calls forth God's healing powers. And it takes us back to the beginning of creation, to the start of Torah, while also bringing us to who we are in this moment, right here, right now. And as the queer, Black, mixed race, Oakland-based Zen priest, Rev. Angel Kyoto Williams, who has tremendous wisdom, wrote in a recent newsletter, every day we see the consequences of people not being in their bodies, people not having respect for bodies. When that happens, justice is elusive. Where does embodiment, mindfulness, and justice meet? Answer is, where do they not? And I'll just close with a thought from Rabbi Sandra Lawson, who says, I did not see this prayer as just a bathroom blessing, thanking God for allowing me to relieve myself in the morning. I saw it as a prayer thanking God for creating me exactly who I am, a Black, queer, Jewish woman, and a rabbi. So may Asher Yatzar serve as a conduit to healing and to blessing to gratitude, to proclaiming our beauty and wonder and worth exactly the way we are. And may it help us to appreciate and to find the holiness in those everyday actions, what may be seen as the mundanity of life, that is so holy, and all that is necessary to live that we so often take for granted.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Adina Allen, for that session on Asher Yatzar. It was beautiful. Let's see, should we look at the chat box and see if there are questions and if folks want to ask anything or make any comments? Can do a little of that?
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay, great. So folks can either put their questions in the chat or if you'd like to raise your virtual hand, that's easier.
I'm just reading through what folks have written. Wow. Yeah, a lot of sharing about different illnesses and surgeries and how this prayer has been meaningful. Yeah, I love that, Jay, a new body, sacred 7, like every 7 years we get like a new body, sort of like the Shemitah cycle. And Jill, if you want to put the, you can put the source sheet in again, just so folks, I tried to put every source that I quoted in a handout so everyone can have that to be able to refer to. That should be it. So anyone want to share like a resonance that they have or a thought that's coming up for them, learning about this blessing or?
Someone had put in the chat earlier a couple of questions, wondering about whether Asher Yatzar should be said, should one take care of business before praying? And also, does or can a parent say this blessing when after changing the diaper of a child?
I love that idea. I don't think that's talked about in rabbinic literature, but what an amazing idea. I love that. And as far as I understand it, yeah, the first thing we're meant to do when we wake up is to relieve ourselves and say this blessing. So, you know, I'm not sure, Julie, what you think. You say Moda Ani first, or you say this first? Maybe you say Moda Ani, the gratitude for awakening as you walk to the bathroom. And
yeah,
go to the bathroom.
I think traditionally, if I'm not mistaken, it's Netilat Yadayim, then bathroom, then well, I don't know. Maybe Modani comes first. Because, right, you say it right when you wake up. I'm not sure.
I think that's how I've done it. Saying Modani, like as I rise from bed, and then I can't usually wait to wash my hands first, so I have to go to the bathroom first and then wash. But and someone asked where this was found in the literature, that the actual words for this blessing are found in the Talmud. Abaye, a rabbi, says these words, like when one goes to the bathroom, one should say this blessing, and then gives over the words of this blessing, which are the words that we use today for this blessing. Yay. Anyone else? I would love to hear if there's another voice that wants to come into the space and just share like a question or an association or, yeah, the name says Benjamin Weiner. That's okay, come on.
No, you have to do it.
We can hear you.
Oh, it says oh, okay, there you go. Sorry, I lead services occasionally for a rabbi, and I keep forgetting when that name's going to come up and when it's not.
Okay.
My name is Randy Stein. No, I just want to say I've always loved this prayer, and I think I put it in the chat, of just the both the metaphorical and the practical associations. And it always seems a shame to me. We seem to kind of glide over it at least in, you know, we have all those morning blessings we stand for, and then we're maybe still standing for this one. And then somehow we move into singing Elohai Neshama. But I love this. I think I'm leading services this Saturday. So I think I'm going to try to make that connection, because they always did feel connected to me, the body and the soul, those two blessings that they so immediately follow each other. So thank you. And thank you for all the art in the background, which I want to know, is that yours?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, well, I probably will hear more about it on Sunday when I attend Okay.
Oh, wonderful. I look forward to that. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, it's interesting that it's one that we, sometimes we say in services as part of Shachrit, as part of the morning service, but really it's meant to be said after the act itself. So we can say it together to like remember that time, but it's something that each of us can also just say on our own, either the full words of it or like our own version of it, just to say like, wow, it's amazing that I'm able to like, my body can do this and then close up again and things, things function in that way. Yeah, Allison, please.
Am I here? Hi. Thank you so much for this. It's just a relief to my heart. And for me, one of the things this prayer blessed me with was the fact that I grew up in a culture where going to the bathroom was considered dirty or disgusting. And actually, it's part of how we're part of the whole cycle of life. And so it remakes sacred the whole cycle of what we take in and what we give back. And it undirties going to the bathroom. It undirties pee and poop. And I think that, my children got to learn that it's a blessing and a miracle because of this prayer. And so I'm grateful that you brought this back up because it removes shame from something that our body does. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's beautiful. It made me think I haven't even said the words pee and poop, and I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old boy, which like that's all we talk about at our house. And this could be a great prayer to like, as one, we talked about the Shema last time as one of the first prayers we teach children, but I don't know, maybe this is a great one to teach children. Like kids love, they're connected to their bodies and thinking about pee and poop all the time. And Betsy, I love your question about why traditionally mezuzot are not put on the door frames of bathrooms. You're right. I strongly believe the importance of one's body cannot be minimized. I think that's a great point. Julie, I don't know, you probably have scribed a mezuzah before. I don't know if you have thoughts on this, but I put a call out on Facebook to ask all my rabbi friends and other friends sort of their connections to this blessing. And somebody said, like, they specifically don't follow the Jewish law around this, and they say this blessing in the bathroom, kind of on what Betsy, you're writing, and Allison, what you just said, of like, it doesn't need to be dirty. Like the bathroom can be a sacred, holy place. So I think that's a really beautiful point. And I think even though the rabbis lifted this up, there also still in some of the laws is some ambivalence about it. And just pointing that out, I think is important. Julie, I don't know if you want to say anything on that, but.
I'll just second everything you said.
Anyone else? Something you're thinking about, or a meaningful experience you've had with Asher Yatzar, or something you're leaving with that you're taking away from this that you want to share? Yeah, Geraldine, is that a hand? And let me know if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Oh, maybe you're on the phone. Okay, somebody else, anybody? Okay, well, just thank you for bringing your bodies to this space today and Harriet, yeah, please. Harriet, can you come off mute? I see your hand raised. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was concerned about the people who have diseases that are not making them feel good because of problems with their insides. And I was thinking that we stand before God, not physically, but spiritually. And so I feel bad for anybody, or sad that anybody who has a problem feels less than whole. And I think one of the things that we have to worry about as a community is making sure that, quote unquote, people with disabilities don't feel unseen or treated poorly. And even if it's not if it's not visible, we have unseen disabilities. And then we need to treat people with physical disabilities whole too. And someone in my family was in a wheelchair and found out that he was treated as though he had no brains because he was sitting low down. And I think we have to remember that. But what struck me about this one, I never have said it, I've known about it, but I'm always in awe of the fact that in a woman's body, she can produce a child and the child can come out wonderful. And I'm just always amazed at how often babies are born perfect. Some of them have difficulties and things like that, but it's a total miracle that this body can come out of another person's body and be an individual. And so I'm always in awe of that.
Thanks, Harriet. And maybe even just thinking about the metaphors that we use, you know, what those evoke, learning what those evoke for other people. Like stand before you, we might just think of it as a spiritual metaphor, but you know, it does have physical resonances. So maybe shifting and changing our metaphors, and maybe also shifting and changing what we think of as perfect, like expanding the possibilities of what perfection really is. Yeah, thank you for that. Bemaya.
Thank you. This was wonderful. This is not a prayer that I'm familiar with. I don't remember hearing it like in services or anything. And there's a song, this artist usually takes like all the prayers but puts them in a very modern language. And he talks about like how he's amazed that he's able, everything works when he goes to the potty, right? And so that's like my daughter's favorite part because like she's that kid. But I thought about the person who's, the people who suggested both um, saying this prayer as diaper change, but also, you know, as my daughter approaches the tween time, like making this like more of a holy thing and not something that's funny, so that she can sort of take seriously her transition. So just never said that. Thank you for that suggestion. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I was thinking, I have a family member with an ostomy bag, right, who doesn't actually, like, the orifices don't open and close. And I think you're meant to say this prayer once a day, given that. And I think we can also say prayers and blessings for a medical system, all different kinds of medical systems that help us to live even with the ways our bodies might not function in the way we might want all the time. Great, I think that's what I've got. And I appreciate everyone being here, and what an opportunity to get to share with you and to hear from you. So thank you everyone for being here today. And thank you, Julie, and My Jewish Learning.